Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let me begin by saying that is a very tough act to follow. Don't know that I could do it. Jane and I met several hundred years ago, just about the time I became mayor of the city of Burlington in 1981. And one of the issues that I had campaigned on was the need for the city to start paying attention to the young people, to the children in the community who really had no voice. The city wasn't doing much, and we put together a youth council, and we found somebody to head up the youth council, and it turned out to be Jane Elmira Driscoll at the time. And before I knew it, hundreds of people were coming out to meetings, and a few years later, under her leadership, we had a beautiful child care center. We had fantastic after-school programs. We had a youth newspaper, a youth television program. We had a variety. We had a Little League baseball program that she started. So she kind of transformed the city and gave the kids of our city a wonderful voice, which we hear 30 years later back from them, helped transform their lives. That's my wife, Jane. And tonight, Jane and I also want to congratulate Chris Spagnoli for the great work she has done. And somebody who I have admired for a very long time, Jackson Brown. And I want to thank all of you for standing up for people who often don't have a voice. At a time when consumers are being ripped off every day by insurance companies, by the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for life-saving medicine, when our people are ripped off by the greed and illegal behavior on Wall Street, when we're ripped off by the lies of the fossil fuel industry, who spend millions to tell us that climate change really isn't real, and then end up ripping off the consumers at the gas pump, get ripped off by the IT companies, and you guys are standing up to that greed, and you're protecting consumers, and I thank you very much for what you do. I certainly will not surprise you when I suggest to you that this is a pivotal moment in American history. And frankly, it is not quite clear what the outcome will be. But this I do know, and Jane made this point, that unless we organize a massive grassroots movement in this country, something that people like Roseanne DeMoro have been doing for years along with their wonderful nurses and the trade union movement. Unless we develop a movement in this country from coast to coast, which is prepared to take on oligarchy, which is prepared to take on the Trump administration and the corporate greed which is destroying the American middle class. Unless we are prepared to do that, the outcome for this country will not be good. But I do believe, having been all over this country, having talked to well over 1 million people, having met so many fantastic people right here in California, young people, black and white, and Latino and Asian American and Native American, I do believe that we are coming together and that we are going to create a government which works for all of us and not just the 1%. As many of us have been saying for years now, we have in the United States today a rigged economy and a corrupt political system. A rigged economy and a corrupt political system, and they are interlaced. The Koch brothers and their billionaire friends have invested many hundreds of millions of dollars in political campaigns, in think tanks and front groups, and they are today able to buy politicians who are prepared to do the bidding of the wealthy and the powerful. That is the sad reality of politics in this country today. And under Trump, their investments, that hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, those investments are paying off very handsomely. The Koch brothers and their right-wing ideologues want to repeal, and all you got to do is read what these guys stand for. They're pretty straightforward about it. They do not believe that government should play a role in protecting the needs of working people, the elderly, the children, the sick, the poor, the environment. They don't believe it. And every day, their goal, their vision of America, in which virtually every important piece of legislation designed to protect working people is repealed, that vision, their vision, is gaining ground. The disgraceful bill passed in the House on Thursday, and it is one of the most disgusting pieces of legislation ever passed, I believe, in the United States House of Representatives, if you can believe it, would throw 24 million people off of the health insurance they currently have. It would cut Medicaid by over $800 billion over a 10-year period. It would defund Planned Parenthood and deny 2.5 million women the choice of medical care that they want, and it would substantially raise premiums for older workers. It would also, as you know, end the mandate that all insurance policies provide essential benefits, including protecting people with pre-existing conditions from losing their insurance. And let us be very clear, let's be very clear about this, is that if this legislation were to pass, and by the way, it will not pass, but if you throw 24 million people, working people, lower income people, off of health insurance, there is no debate but that thousands of those people will die. This legislation is a death sentence for thousands of people, and for even more, there are people who become sicker than they should ever have become. That is what this legislation is about. But the truth of the matter is, despite how ugly and barbaric that legislation is, the truth of the matter, and I have to tell you this, is this bill really was not a health care bill. This bill was a tax bill designed to provide $300 billion in tax breaks for the top 2% and hundreds of billions more for the insurance companies and the drug companies. That's really what the bill was about. It's kind of incidental that they threw 24 million people off of health insurance. And then we have the scene, which is almost impossible to describe, of the President of the United States telling us how fantastic and great and really great This legislation is throwing 24 million people off of health insurance. Really great. And then at the same time, he's in a room with the Prime Minister of Australia, and he says to the Prime Minister, well, your health care system is better than ours. Well, I do have to say, you know, what do they say about, well, I won't go into that, but everybody is right once in a while. And on this particular instance, Trump is quite right. The Australian healthcare system is a universal system. It guarantees health care for all of their people. And by the way, cost of prescription drugs in Australia are about 50% of what they are in the United States because they negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. So let me say to the President that if you think the Australian healthcare system is so good, well, I am going to give you the opportunity to support legislation that I'm going to introduce legislation that I am so proud that our nurses are leading the effort on, which is a Medicare for All single-payer program. Now, I'm going to do that in Washington, but let me ask you here in California, please make my life easier. Please lead the country and pass the single-payer bill that is now in the legislature. The great state of California can send a message that will be heard all over this country and all over the world if you pass single payer here, and I look forward to working with you to make that happen. But let us be clear that the incredible greed of the oligarchy, as represented by Trump, goes beyond the issue of health care. In fact, the greed and the ugliness that we are seeing is almost beyond belief. At a time when, as I think all of you know, we are seeing a grotesque and massive level of income and wealth inequality in this country. The Trump administration wants to make massive cuts in after-school programs. They want to cut Pell Grants, making it harder for kids to go to college. They want to cut heating assistance so that older people will go cold in the winter. They want to cut the WIC program, which is designed to protect low-income pregnant women and their babies. They want to cut the Meals on Wheels program, for God's sakes, which is often the program that provides at least one nutritious meal a day for a low-income senior citizen. They want to cut massively, of course, environmental protection because you have a president who thinks that climate change is a hoax. But in the midst of all of that, what they also want to do is repeal the estate tax, which would provide a $353 billion tax giveaway to the top 0.2%. Throw 24 million people off of health insurance, cut back on after-school programs, the WIC program, heating programs, Pell Grants, in order to give a massive, massive tax break to the top 0.2%. Trump's proposal, this repeal of the estate tax, which is something the Republican leadership has been fighting for years. I mean, this is almost unbelievable, and some of you are going to Google this to see if I'm telling you the truth, because it is so insane. Under that proposal, the Walton family, the owners of Walmart, the wealthiest family in our country, would receive a $53 billion tax cut. The Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family in America, would receive a $34 billion tax cut. The family of Sheldon Adelson, who contributed $5 million to Trump's inaugural, would receive a $12 billion tax cut. And by the way, the Trump family would receive a $4 billion tax cut. One of the problems that we have is that this is so outrageous that people don't even believe it. They really do not believe that today we have a government that would cut programs for low-income pregnant women in order to give a $50 billion tax break to the richest family in the country. It's just too crazy to wrap your mind around, but it is literally the truth. So where we are today, as I mentioned, is at a pivotal moment. The bad news is they are in power, but the good news is that on almost every major issue facing this country, whether it is raising the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour, whether it is pay equity for women, whether it is rebuilding our infrastructure, whether it is addressing criminal justice reform and immigration reform, whether it is transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. On all of those issues, vast majority of the American people are on our side. So our job now is to educate, our job is to organize, our job is to bring the American people together around an agenda that works for all of us, not just the billionaires. And when we do that, we're going to transform this country, and we are going to send our Republican friends packing. Thank you all very much.